Alrighty. So remember yesterday, the winged monkeys are taking Dorothy and the lion and Toto back to the Wicked Witch. The leader of the winged monkeys explained to the Wicked Witch, "We dare not harm the child, nor her dog. Your power over our band is now ended." Then the winged monkeys flew away. The Wicked Witch was worried about the mark on Dorothy's forehead, for she knew it protected her from evil, and when she looked down and saw the silver shoes, she trembled with fear. But she saw in Dorothy's eyes that the child didn't know of the power of the silver shoes, nor the protection from the good witch's kiss. So the Wicked Witch said to Dorothy harshly, "Come with me and see that you mind everything I tell you, for if you don't, I'll make an end of you as I did of the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow." Dorothy followed her through the castle to the kitchen, where the witch bade her clean kettles and sweep the floor and keep the fire fed with wood. Dorothy went to work meekly, and the witch went into the courtyard and tried to harness the cowardly lion like a horse. But the lion gave a loud roar and bounded at her fiercely. After that, she took no food to the imprisoned lion, and every day she came to the yard at noon and asked if the lion was ready to be harnessed like a horse, and the lion would answer no. The lion didn't have to do as the witch wished, because every night Dorothy brought him food after the witch went to sleep. Then he and Dorothy tried to plan their escape, but they could find no way out of the castle. Now the Wicked Witch longed to steal the silver shoes Dorothy wore, for they were very powerful. But the child only took them off at night and when she took her bath. The witch was too afraid of the dark to go into Dorothy's room at night, and her dread of water was greater than her fear of the dark, so she never touched water. One day the witch played a trick on Dorothy. She placed an iron bar, which she made invisible by magic, in the middle of the kitchen floor. Poor Dorothy stumbled over it and fell. One of the silver shoes came off, and the witch snatched it and put it on her own skinny foot. The wicked woman was greatly pleased, for one of the shoes gave her half the power of their charm, and Dorothy could not use it against her even if she had known how to do so. The little girl grew angry when she saw that she had lost one of her pretty shoes, and she said to the witch, "Give me back my shoe." "I won't," retorted the witch, laughing, "for it is now my shoe, not yours, and someday I shall get the other one from you too." This made Dorothy so very angry that she picked up a bucket of water and dashed it over the witch, wetting her from head to foot. The wicked creature shrieked, and she began to shrink. "See what you've done," she screamed. "I'm going to melt away." "I'm very sorry indeed," said Dorothy, who was truly frightened to see the witch actually melting away before her very eyes. "I never thought a little girl like you would ever be able to melt me and end my wicked deeds. Look out, here I go." With these words, the witch fell down in a melted, shapeless mass and began to spread over the kitchen floor. Seeing that she had really melted away to nothing, Dorothy drew another bucket of water and threw it over the mess. She picked out the silver shoe, then swept it all out the door and ran to tell the lion that the Wicked Witch of the West was dead. Go Dorothy. The Cowardly Lion was much pleased to hear that the Wicked Witch had been melted by a bucket of water, and Dorothy unlocked the gate of his prison and set him free. Dorothy's first act was to call together all the Winkies who had long been the witch's slaves and tell them that they were free. There was great rejoicing among the yellow Winkies, for they had been made to work hard during many years for the Wicked Witch, who had always treated them with great cruelty. They kept this day a holiday, then and ever after, and spent the time feasting and dancing. "If our friends the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were only with us," said the lion, "I should be quite happy." "Do you suppose we could rescue them?" asked the girl. "We can try," answered the lion. So they called the yellow Winkies and asked them if they would help, and the Winkies said that they would be delighted to do all in their power for Dorothy, who had set them free from bondage. So she chose a number of the Winkies and they all started away. They traveled that day and part of the next until they came to the rocky plain where the Tin Woodman lay, all battered and bent. His axe was rusted and the handle broken. The Winkies lifted him tenderly in their arms and carried him back to the castle, where Dorothy asked if any of the Winkies were tinsmiths. "Oh, yes, some of us are very good tinsmiths," they told her. "Then bring them to me," she said. And when the tinsmiths came, she asked, "Can you straighten out the dents in the Tin Woodsman and solder him back together where he is broken?" The tinsmiths looked at the Tin Woodman carefully and replied that they could mend him so he would be as good as ever. They set to work in one of the big rooms of the castle and worked for 3 days and 4 nights, hammering and bending and soldering and polishing the Tin Woodman until at last he was straightened out. To be sure, there were several patches on him, but the tinsmiths did a good job. Meanwhile, another of the Winkies had made an axe handle of solid gold and fitted it to the woodsman's axe, instead of the old broken handle. When at last the Tin Woodman walked into Dorothy's room and thanked her for rescuing him, he was so pleased that he wept tears of joy. Her own tears fell thick and fast at the joy of meeting her friend again. As for the lion, he wiped his eyes so often with the tip of his tail that it became quite wet, and he was obliged to go out into the sun until it dried. "If only we had the Scarecrow with us again," sighed the Tin Woodman, after Dorothy had finished telling him all that had happened. "We must try to find him," said the girl. So she called the Winkies to help her, and they walked all that day and a part of the next, until they came to the tall tree, in the branches of which the winged monkeys had tossed the Scarecrow's clothes. The Woodman set to chopping it down. In a short time, the tree fell over with a crash, and the Scarecrow's clothes fell out of the branches and onto the ground. The Winkies carried them back to the castle, where they were stuffed with nice clean straw, and behold, here was the Scarecrow, good as ever, thanking them over and over again for saving him. Now that they were reunited, Dorothy and her friends spent a few happy days at the castle. But one day the girl said, "We must go back to Oz and claim his promise." "Yes," said the Woodman, "I'll get my heart." "And I'll get my brains," added the Scarecrow. "And I'll get my courage," said the Lion. "And I'll get back to Kansas," cried Dorothy. "Oh, let us start for the Emerald City tomorrow." The next day they bade the Winkies goodbye. The Winkies were sorry to have them go, but they had grown so fond of the Tin Woodman that they begged him to stay and rule over them. But finding they were determined to go, the Winkies gave Toto and the Lion each a golden collar, and to Dorothy they gave a beautiful bracelet, and to the Scarecrow they gave a gold-headed walking stick to keep him from stumbling, and to the Tin Woodman they gave a silver oil can inlaid with gold and set with precious jewels. Dorothy went to the witch's cupboard to fill her basket with food for the journey, and there she saw the golden cap. She tried it on her own head and found it fitted her exactly. She knew nothing about the charm of the golden cap, but she saw that it was pretty, so she made up her mind to wear it and carry her sunbonnet. Then they started for the Emerald City. The travelers knew they must go straight east toward the rising sun. But at noon, when the sun was over their heads, they realized that they were lost in the great barren fields. One by one, they lost heart, even Dorothy. She sat down on the grass and looked at her companions, and they sat down and looked at her. And Toto panted and looked at Dorothy as if to ask what they should do next. "Suppose we call the field mice," she suggested. "They'll tell us the way to Oz." So they called out, and in a few minutes the Queen and her subjects came running. The Queen of the Mice asked how she could help them. "Can you tell us where the Emerald City is?" they asked. "Certainly," answered the Queen, "but it is a great way off. Why don't you use the charm of the golden cap you wear to call the winged monkeys to help you? They will carry you there in no time." "I didn't know there was a charm," answered Dorothy in surprise. "It is written inside the cap," replied the Queen. "Don't be afraid. They must obey the wearer of the cap. Goodbye." And she scampered out of sight with all the mice hurrying after her. Dorothy looked inside the golden cap and read the charm. Then she put the cap back on her head and followed the instructions to summon the winged monkeys. They heard a great chattering and flapping of wings as the band of winged monkeys flew up to them. The king bowed low before Dorothy and asked for her command. "We wish to go to the Emerald City," said the girl. "We will carry you," replied the king. So 2 monkeys caught her in their arms and flew away with her. Others took the frightened Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the Lion, and one little monkey seized Toto and flew after them. In no time at all, the odd creatures set the travelers down carefully before the gate of the Emerald City. The king bowed to Dorothy, and the band flew away. The guardian of the gates led the travelers through the city, telling all that they had melted the Wicked Witch of the West. The soldier with the green whiskers carried the news to Oz, but Oz made no reply for several days. At last, the wizard sent for them to come to him, but the throne was empty. They kept close to the door and one another. They heard a disembodied voice say solemnly, "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Why do you seek me?" "We have come to claim our promises," said Dorothy. "Has the Wicked Witch been destroyed?" asked the voice, and Dorothy thought it trembled slightly. "Yes," she answered, "I melted her with water." "Dear me," said the voice, "how sudden. Well, come to me tomorrow. I must have time to think." The lion thought it might be as well to frighten the wizard, so he gave a large, loud roar, which was so dreadful that Toto jumped away from him in alarm and tiptoed over the screen that stood in a corner. As it fell with a crash, they looked that way, and they saw a little old man with a bald head who seemed to be as much surprised as they were. Ooh, we will end today with this great picture. Look at that little bald man behind the screen. Goodness gracious. I will see you tomorrow. I hope you have a great rest of your day.